Okay, everybody, now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for the meeting. It's Dr. Peggy Eby, wildlife ecologist, and she's been invited because Peggy's been overseeing a wonderful project called the Habitat Restoration Hub, and it's highly relevant to the work of the Restoration Decade Alliance because it's an example of the type of registration database that could be of immense value if rolled out across Australia at large. Now, I understand this is operating through the Atlas of Living Australia's BioCollect platform. Is that right, Peggy?
Yes, Teen, it is. And without BioCollect, it would not have been possible. So, hello, yes, I'm a wildlife ecologist, as Teen said. I've spent my career working on conservation and management-based research for flying foxes in southeastern Australia. And through that time, I developed an interest in the capacity for habitat restoration work to help mitigate some of the challenges that the animals face. And um, attempted to initiate some research along those lines, only to discover that there wasn't a central place I could go to acquire information on where habitat restoration works had occurred. And that became the seed for this. The work has been funded, the early work was funded through a Hendra virus research grant with the National Science Foundation. It also has received money from the New South Wales Koala Strategy, from a bushfire recovery grant, and from a Queensland Government Threatened Species Management grant. And the bias in the funding is apparent. You'll see that in the locations and the habitats that have been documented so far, but that's becoming less apparent through time. So the aim of this was to establish a central repository that will collect and manage information on both past and current vegetation restoration sites. This is not a new idea. People have made an attempt at establishing such a thing in Australia before, but have not had success in finding a home for it. And there is an existing appetite within habitat restoration practitioners and managers, which has allowed it to grow and to be self-sustaining in terms of interest. So the main points of interest for most people who are involved are habitat scale coordination and strategic planning for their work that brings together information from a number of different entities working in a location, reporting against their program goals. Particularly in interest in is evidence-based assessments of restoration practice and the ability to quantify actions and outcomes at flexible and user-defined spatial and temporal scales. And then, of course, that would lead to a number of research questions that could be investigated from the data that's being entered. So because I'm not a restoration practitioner, I think in some ways that helped. I didn't come to this with any particular view of how it should look. And the program itself has benefited greatly from the input of a number of highly qualified and people with long experience in the area who have been consistent in their support. Overall, there were some aims of how the program should work, how the platform should work that we looked to achieve. It had to be free to end users. So many of the people who we were looking to acquire information from don't have a great deal of financial capacity. We wanted it to be available online and in open access. It needed to have privacy safeguards that would protect private landholders if they wanted to have their location either be made inaccurate or to only allow certain gated people to see their data. Importantly, it needed to be enduring and secure, and the ALA provides that very well. We're lucky here in Australia to have the Atlas of Living Australia. We needed, of course, for this to be user-friendly. We're looking to acquire as much information from as many people as we can. The data entry forms had to be standard so that we could make direct comparisons between sites and aggregate information. And the data download, we were looking for a straightforward system for downloading data and being able to filter it at multi-levels. And then we were looking for some responsive technical support. And again, the ALA BioCollect has provided all of that. We had some funding that was looking for us to provide an extra independent review of data management and governance protocols. And can I say that again, the ALA delivered in all of that. The independent reviewer was happy with all of the protocols in place with the ALA, as one might expect. So how does this work? It's pretty straightforward. We acquire information on restoration sites and the work that was conducted from the records held by a range of groups and entities and by individuals, sometimes in the form of reports or records, sometimes, particularly for historical data, it's simply the recollections of those who were involved in the work. And that business of sourcing the information is conducted by part-time facilitators working in regional areas. And then the information that's gathered then gets entered into the standard data forms. It's a spatially based system, as you might expect. So polygons of the actual restoration work sites are key to this. Sometimes when a polygon isn't available, a drop pin can be used instead. And this work of entering the data into the form is largely conducted by the data owners themselves. Backup option is provided through some hub-funded contractors. And there's also a reasonable amount of support that's been developed in terms of user guides, online training sessions, etc. Now, BioCollect is a project-based platform. And so in the case of the hub, we have 36 different projects that come together. The information that's collected in the projects comes together and is available for sharing. Each of the projects is defined by a restoration goal and by a location in our case, but that can happen differently, of course, within BioCollect. And hub administrators at the high level umbrella hub administrators then create the projects and establish membership of the projects. Only people who are members of the project can enter data or edit the data that's been entered, although the output is available open access. Then, as I said, above these multiple projects is a landing page, which is a single point of web access to the projects, and it enables easy navigation between them and rapid data acquisition across all the different work sites that are entered in the hub. And I think what I'd like to do now, if possible, if this works, is to go online and show you what it actually looks like. So there's now sufficient traffic on the Habitat Restoration Hub that it is searchable. And this is the initial page that you see. So the landing page, and if you scroll down, you come across and you can visualize the different projects that have been entered. And then you can collect information at the landing page level, which gives you the data, that's all of the data that's been entered, or you can, and which I'm going to show you now, select one of the projects and simply reduce the information, the data, to that single project. So this is the Northern Rivers Koala Habitat Restoration Project. All the projects are organized as websites. So there's a page that describes the project itself. There's a page for lodging information associated with the project. And then this page, the survey page, which is the ALA terminology, is where the data entry forms reside. There are 4 data entry forms available in the hub. The main one here, though, is the general registration form. And I'm just going to open that for you now so you can take a look at the layout and get an idea of how this works. Peter Brenton at the ALA is in charge of BioCollect, and he does a wonderful job of form layout. This isn't from us. So there are 102 different possible data entry fields in this form. Only 13 of them are required fields, and most of them are indicated here by the red asterisk. Most of them are about simply lodging the information on where the site is and what it's called. But then you scroll through and there are boxes. The data entry fields are organized into boxes of similar data entry. And as you scroll down, you'll see that there are, most of the data entry is numeric or it's categorical, again, looking to make the information aggregable. Now you lose some detail in that, but it more than makes up for it, I think, in the ability to aggregate the information. And then there's also options to add additional photographs or reports or whatever, and attach them to the form for the data site.
Peggy, can I just ask a question at this point? This is one ALA project or one habitat restoration hub project, but I think maybe listeners might not appreciate that within this one project, there are many sites. There are many real, actual project sites.
That's right. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. We have more than 4,000 sites.
Oh my God.
That have been entered so far. Yeah. So I'm just very briefly, because I know you could spend hours looking at this, but the most important, one of the important things here is to understand that species can be entered. So plant species in the case of the hub, and all that data entry gets accumulated as occurrence records within the ALA. And then you complete your data entry, come to the bottom, click on submit, and the form and the information that's been acquired in the form then gets saved to the project and to the hub. Okay, and then just really quickly, the data can be viewed in different forms through the data tab. And again, this format is the same for all BioCollect projects. The data can be filtered. There's possibility for multi-level filtering, so you can reduce, in this case, there are 1,300 records in this project. You can reduce them down by using the different data entry fields. You can look at a list of the different sites. You can view a map of where the site locations are. In this case, again, it's the koala habitat restoration work in the Northern Rivers area of New South Wales. So that's how it works. Then if you want to download the data, it's really straightforward. You filter it the way you want, and then you click this tab here, download, and you're sent a link. And the download takes the form of the polygons. So it's a shapefile with the polygons, and then an Excel spreadsheet with all of the data that's been entered in all of the forms in your download. So I'll just try to show you some examples. There, as you can imagine, with the restrictions to the sort of information you can portray, you can visualize, is only limited to the data entry fields in the form. So this is a map showing 4,500 restoration work sites where the polygons have been uploaded. 500 of those are yet to have data entered. One of the great things about this project is that 67 different organizations, entities have contributed, as well as multiple private landholders. And I think one of the things that has surprised me in this program was to discover how much restoration work in Australia is actually being conducted, or at least in the areas where the hub is covered so far, as being conducted outside of the main government organizations that are funding generally. So there are small NGOs, there are, as I said, there are self-funded private landowners who are doing the work. There's newly developed entities all the time. There are entities that are based on private and corporate donations and do quite a lot, an increasing amount of restoration work. And finding those entities and getting their information has been a really rewarding exercise, but challenging in some ways. It needs people on the ground to know. This is a map showing that one of the benefits that a lot of the end users are particularly interested in. This is just the data entered in the Northern Rivers area. Each of the different colors on these dots is a different entity. And the important point here is the amount of overlap that there is in particular areas. Huge numbers of groups working in the same area that have not been able to share their information. So they haven't known where each other is working. They haven't understood how to plan overall for their local area or regional area without that information. This sort of exercise is so valuable, in my view, for habitat restoration in Australia and globally, to have this sort of data entry and database. You can download, as I said, the shape files, the aquamarine polygons in this map. This is a 10-kilometer grid out in the Northern Rivers area. As it says, this is Mullumbimby. But what I want to point I want to make here is these are tiny habitat restoration sites. But collectively, cumulatively, they make up 73% of the area, the total area of habitat restoration work within the Northern Rivers. So most of the work in this part of Australia occurs as tiny entities. And one of the great other benefits of this sort of database is it provides a mechanism for the contribution being made by those tiny, tiny restoration sites to be aggregated and demonstrated and used to inform natural resource management initiatives. This is just another example looking at the distribution of the sites in the Northern Rivers based on their size. There are so many different questions that the people who contribute and the entities that contribute are interested in addressing. This is about the koala work and its change in funding through time, again, in the Northern Rivers. And the interesting thing here is the huge increase in the area of restoration work for koalas that's been conducted, but still most of it is small sites. Has there been a change in tenure in terms of where the restoration work has been conducted? And yes, there's an increase in privately owned land. Has there been a change in the restoration method? No, not so much. Another element of working in this database is that we've been able to put together stories of individual sites. So this is Coogin Nature Reserve. It has its own project. It started in 1994. This was a report written by Rosemary Joseph in 1997. And there are a series of project reports for this site that have been attached to the project for Coogin Nature Reserve. But the other thing is, if we go through, this is going to show you where work was done at individual years. And I just keep in mind when we're talking about the richness of the information that's being gathered, that each of these polygons has a form registered against it with a great deal of information. So if I'm just going to scroll through time, and you can see how the work has changed in distribution. There's stories within those polygons about how there have been changes in methods, tree spacing, for example, various other bits of information that are being acquired by this database. So part of what I've done is given you a sales pitch on the hub, but also on the benefits of working with the Atlas of Living Australia within their BioCollect program to register restoration sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. That was extremely interesting. And if this is what might happen in other regions, imagine what a national hub might look like, a database might look like. So there are many, many regions in Australia that are highly active, particularly with community. Another comment that I'd like to make before going to questions from our members is that 10 by 10 kilometre grid map that you showed with tiny restoration sites, they're not necessarily isolated restoration sites. They look to me like linkages and areas where there've been improvements in condition from degraded states. So these are enhancements and connections rather than, they're not, in other words, sites too small to be paid attention to. Then they're not able to be dismissed. This is the sort of work that needs to be done to reintegrate fragmented landscapes.
Yes, and having the polygons be available and understanding the work that was done within each of the polygons is very beneficial for coming up with decisions on how to plan for connectivity, particularly in that examples, it was primarily koala work, but also how to identify individual habitat areas that need to be increased, where their area needs to be increased vegetation types in order to benefit wildlife as well as the landscape generally. Yeah.
Right. And I believe you haven't so far had big scrub rainforest conservancy sites entered into here. So
only a handful of those. So while there are, I don't know, what was it, 1,300 restoration sites for koalas there. There's also restoration sites that are rainforests that's not koala habitat. And that increases our understanding of the overall effort. Yeah. Yep. Now, look, every time I speak to another entity, there's a whole other range of, it's amazing the amount of work that's been done. It is quite astonishing. Yeah.
Now, I'll get to some of the questions. One person asked, could work sites be entered twice?
Oh, yes. The protection against that is the spatial definition of the work sites. So it's very straightforward to determine whether you've got two work sites that are overlapping. And that happens at regional administrators level as part of a data cleaning process. Those things are checked. There also is a code. It's an alphanumeric code that prevents two polygons being identified with the same name. While the site name may overlap, the codes are unique. So we're able to find those sorts of errors as well easily.
Okay. And this you call data cleaning?
Yes, well, that's what I call it, but it's checking the data. Yeah.
Okay, fabulous. That's a great idea. Now, another of our members thought that so far the data appears very terrestrial focused. Now, obviously, it's a terrestrial region, but there are wetlands and saltwater intrusions in that region. How do you incorporate aquatic restoration into this?
There's no limit to the number of forms you can create. the form that we created initially, was to cater for the funding streams that we were reporting against. So it was koalas and flying foxes, and it's definitely terrestrial based. But there's no restriction. I would anticipate that the data entry fields for aquatic restoration would be different to the data entry fields for terrestrial. There'd be some overlap, but a lot of different data fields, and you simply create another form for aquatic restoration.
Thank you. Another question we've got here from one of our listeners is, can historical projects be entered that don't have data collated in say, this structure?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the oldest site at the moment in the hub is something like, it's in the mid 1980s. And we don't have an accurate polygon, but we have an understanding of where, and we have a point locality for it with an indication of the accuracy. So all it's saying is that somewhere within this area, the work was done, and it's broadly descriptive. That's one of the reasons to reduce the number of required fields. So there's only a handful of bits of information you need to enter in the required fields, and there are options of simply saying unknown.
Yeah.
In that.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. That sounds good. And now, of course, what interests Restoration Decade Alliance most, well, it's not, we're extremely interested in the exact purposes that you are also interested in. In other words, general restoration questions, where are we going? What are we doing? What have we done? Where should we go next? So this is irrespective of what national directions there might be. However, we're also very interested in Australia's national approach, the national approach to restoration, and in encouraging a national approach. And that has been, I guess, supercharged by the Global Biodiversity Framework's Target 2. So Australia is a signatory to the Global Biodiversity Framework, and Target 2 is the restoration target. And so all countries are being asked to be as ambitious as possible with respect to our restoration by the year 2030. We want to have as much area under effective restoration as possible by that date, and we have to report on that. So a lot of countries or regions are saying, this is what we're doing so far, and this is the extent we want to increase our effort by 2030. This is our target. Australia's not quite doing that, but it would be great if we could report by 2030 that this is the work we're already doing, and this is how we're going to expand it. But in fact, the request is to have a certain area under effective restoration by 2030. And that includes all restoration, whether it's a specific project being undertaken particularly for this challenge by the government and funded by government, or whether it's activity broadly undertaken as part of the restoration movement across Australia. And we really need to report on this in order for us not to understate what Australia is doing and to use it as a mechanism for galvanising action and empowering the community for future. Now, I understand that the Global Biodiversity Framework Target 2 has already set up, in collaboration with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration people, a platform for registering projects, and it's called the Framework for Ecological Restoration Monitoring, FERM, F-E-R-M, for global reporting under the GBF. Now, I'm just wondering how well this came up in a question from one of our listeners. How could a project like this complement FERM, FERM, for global reporting? Is it, in fact, possible to both have a bespoke Australian system like yours, but writ large, and for it to be compatible with reporting under FERM firm. So we understand that there are other projects such as Restore RESTOR, the database, international database, that is able to be translated into firm. And I'm just wondering, is it possible to have a combination of firm and a bespoke Australian program? What do you think that would be possible? I suppose it's up to ALA, but
Yeah. But, is
yeah.
it possible? Is it possible? Yes, of course, of
Okay.
course. And within BioCollect, I suppose one of the ways one could go about it is to have a form that is the firm form, and then a supplementary form that would where extra information could be documented, because certainly most of the restoration work that we've come across that has been undertaken in the last decade is well documented. It's well documented.
Okay.
And it would be, in my view, it would be a shame to go through the exercise of locating those sites and those programs in the first instance and not documenting in this open access, enduring archival sort of space, the work that was done. It'll be so valuable in the future. I just wanted to point out that increasingly monitoring of the work that's being conducted is now starting to be funded, and some sites have long-term programs that are initiated on them. And so we've created forms that are specifically to document that. A form for reporting, recording the outcomes of the design and the outcomes of monitoring work, and a form that's looking at the progress of work through time and whether there's been follow-up work at the same site, those sorts of things. It's a sort of system that can be as detailed and as complex as you like, really.
I get it. I do. It's very impressive to me. It's what we've been waiting for, I think. No, well, you haven't been waiting. You've been getting on and doing the work. So should we develop an Australia-wide project similar to this, what would be the advantages of having this as an accompaniment to firm?
The detail, being able to acquire the detail. I've only just taken a very cursory look at the firm website. It also seems to me, from what I've seen so far, and may not be the final version, that it's slightly restrictive to large entities, that there isn't a process that's clear for a private landholder to enter their information, or a very small NGO with a specific conservation aim or restoration aim to enter their information. And I think having something in the ALA benefits that. I also am not clear on how much detail is being logged, is being collected in firm. What I've seen so far, it seems pretty high level, but that's probably because they're looking to, again, acquire the same sort of similar information globally, which is a very different approach to the hub. Restoration in Australia is conducted in a number of different ways by a number of different entities and individuals. And I think it would be, from what I've seen so far, but please, that's a big caveat. From what I've seen so far, I think it would be difficult to get all of that information logged into firm. But if it goes through the something like an ALA project, then the ALA perhaps would be the entity that's reporting into
I
firm.
see. And the networks that are linked between each other within the restoration field in Australia would be
represented.
Yes, empowered to encourage each other to do that. Whereas if it was through firm, through an international process or a government process, there'd be less motivation. Is that something you would think would occur?
Yes, yes. And I think access to the data and an understanding that it isn't going to disappear when 2030 happens, that's a motivation for people to contribute to the hub. But primarily the motivation is to look at those visualizations that I showed you at the end. When people see that, they want to be part of it.
Aha, exactly. And in their region and in
Yes.
the country. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. But we also want to be able to do the best so that we can show off what we're doing to other countries. So there is definitely motivation there. But what really I think is a very strong message from the Habitat Restoration Hub, your project, is that it's the many, many small projects, particularly on private land, that accumulate the most area in the end. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's pretty interesting. And that's really what you would expect, considering it is those individual Australians who are engaged with their particular part of the country and wanting to do the right thing or wanting to make a really creative contribution to the state of the environment. That's where the power lies. So we need to be able to pick that up and report on it. So you've mentioned a whole lot of things like the need for perhaps facilitation or training and data cleaning. You also mentioned that maybe ALA could be an administrator for Australia's reporting, but how would it work? How would this work across Australia? Would there need to be some sort of regional system? Could you elaborate on that if you have any
In my
thoughts?
view, I mean, you saw the thousands of sites, and we've only just scratched the surface. If this goes to a national level, it will just become cumbersome to try. And it needs, in my view, it would need to be regionalized in order to facilitate the networking and the data acquisition in the first instance, and then the task just becomes too vast if there are too many sites to scrutinize for accuracy and etc.
And
I
what
think
would
regionalized.
Okay, good. And so there would need to be funding that goes to regions. There'd probably need to be funding going to agencies and funding going to ALA.
I don't know how that would work.
Yeah,
I
but
don't.
someone will have to think that through. But
Yes.
really, if I agree with you that if we're going to do this, let's do it in a way that's going to be meaningful and useful for Australia, not just for reporting for the GBF. It would make a huge difference to being able to plan what our target should be from 2030 to 2050. Like it's now, we've got 5 years left out of a decade. It's taken all this time to identify what we might do for what Australia's target might be for target to GBF.
And how much the other illuminating element of working in the hub with the data in the hub is to understand the costs, to understand the amount of volunteer effort that's gone in, to really understand what capacity there is to meet the targets and what resources would realistically need to be made available.
Yeah. So to plan, we need to know what's going on already, who's doing it, who's paying for it, and then make a meaningful strategic direction for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And best of luck with all of the hard work ahead. I know you've already done a great deal, but there's more to come.
Likewise, Peggy. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.